You, however, are finished.
FNAF Into the Pit is a brand new upcoming FNAF game, but what actually is it? Is it canon? Where does it fit into the lore? How does it seemingly feature William Afton and even Helpy? Well, don't worry, I have all them answers in today's video. You're not going to want to miss any of this. Now, the FNAF Into the Pit video game is not to be confused with the FNAF Into the Pit graphic novel or book. The book came out in December 2019, and the graphic novel actually came out in 2022, so the game in itself is a completely new entity. And this is where things get really interesting, because the book seemingly takes us all over the timeline, and the game seemingly follows the book, but there are going to be several huge differences, and that's something I will cover later.
Remember to stay close to your parents and leave before dark, kids. There are strangers out there.
Now, everyone on the internet seems to be debating whether this is going to be canon to the game timeline or not, and the simple answer to that is, when has a FNAF game never been canon to the universe? It hasn't. So, the simple answer is, this game will indeed be canon to the game universe. So, with that being said, where is it going to fit in the timeline, and what even is the story of Into the Pit? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. Now, the game looks set to follow the story of the book, but there are several differences, but let's cover the book story first, so then we can easily move into the game story. Now, the graphic novel and the book are basically the same, with the exception of a few cutscenes here and there in the graphic novel, but nothing really to write home about. Basically, in summary, there's a boy called Oswald. He visits an abandoned Freddy Fazbear pizzeria and jumps into an old ball pit. He awakens in a vision of 1985, where he sees Spring Bonnie murdering 6 children, not 5, 6, and that's something again we'll touch on later. Oswald's father pulls him out, but gets trapped inside there himself. In the real world, his father is replaced by Spring Bonnie, but no one except Oswald realizes it. Oswald returns to the pizzeria, rescues his dad, and kills Spring Bonnie. And boom, that is it in a nutshell. But you might be thinking, well, hang on, in the game trailer and screenshots, we see it at a place called Jeff's Pizza. How is that? Well, simple. Jeff's Pizza is set in the future, where Jeff's Pizza used to actually be Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They basically shut down Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, someone bought it and turned it into another pizzeria under his own name, Jeff's Pizza. Now, the main thing to note about this place is that it has a small stage, which no one performs on, a small rectangular ball pit surrounded by yellow netting that's roped off with a sign saying, "Do not use." Now, it's at this point where you're probably wondering, how does a ball pit suddenly transport a young boy back in time to 1985? It's not Back to the Future, so how does that happen in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe? Well, let me continue to explain. Because in the book, and it's seemingly in the game, because we have multiple screenshots showing us that there's different timelines happening throughout. Again, that's something I'll cover later. In the book, he takes off his shoes, submerges himself in the dusty red, blue, and green bowls, and then he emerges up from the ball pit, seeing loads of kids, the place jam-packed, and a trio of animatronics. A brown bear, a blue rabbit, and a bird girl. Quite evidently, the original Freddy Fazbear animatronics, which we see in the original OG FNAF 1 location. An extremely interesting point to note here is this is 1985, predating 1987 with the toy animatronics, thus confirming the original cast were in circulation before the FNAF 2 toy animatronics. And I know you probably already know that, but there are some people out there which still believe the OG animatronics came after the toys. Oswald basically discovers that if he goes back into the ball pit, he can return to his normal point in time. He does this several times, going back and forth dimensions seemingly, where he runs into the yellow rabbit. And one time when he goes back into the ball pit, all hell is breaking loose and the yellow rabbit has killed basically all 5 children.
Remember, boys and girls, if you want to be happy and you want to be free, then Freddy Fazbear's is the place to be.
Now you might be asking yourself, how will this now play into the game? And you still haven't explained how he can seemingly time travel using a ball pit. Well, I'll answer them questions for you right now. Now in the book, it doesn't exclusively say how he time travels using this ball pit, but we've got a rough idea. In the Fazbear Frights epilogue, a detective is going through all the murders and disappearances of the kids, and he goes into this ball pit. There's actually blood samples from that ball pit over 30 odd so years ago, and each one of those blood samples dated to a year someone went missing. Now in the book, it's basically all but confirmed that agony is the cause for all the weird stuff which is going down in the Pizzaplex. Well, Jeff's Pizza to be correct. So with that being said, it's all but now confirmed that that ball pit houses at least 3 decades worth of agony. And we have good explanations for agony and Remnant. They basically create haunted objects as such. So when Oswald himself goes into this pit, he experiences all the agony of all them victims. Now in the book, he's obviously experiencing the agony of the 5 original victims because he's going back to that original pizzeria, and he sees the deaths taking place with Spring Bonnie. Makes sense, right? He's experiencing their pain in that ball pit, transports him back to where it all happened, where it all began. That makes sense for the book, but for the game and story, and for it to be a lengthy story, that wouldn't make sense. There wouldn't be enough to fill it out. If you look in the trailer, it actually shows us we're traveling all over the timeline. Different places, different dimensions, different years even. This picture here shows Freddy with a double set of teeth. That only happens in basically the 1985 pizzeria. We also see a Chica with only 2 sets of toes, or claws, or whatever you want to call them. This is only ever features in FNAF 1, because other iterations feature it with 3 toes, such as the Nightmare versions, etc. We have a Toy Bonnie poster confirming the FNAF 2 pizzeria, again showing we're all over the place in the timeline. FNAF 6 alleyway here, potentially, with Helpy in the dumpster. Now, we know that's from FNAF 6, which is the pizzeria simulator. That is way, way in the future in the timeline. Not to mention, we see ourselves in some type of bedroom, which has a picture on the wall featuring 3 people, all dressed in purple, and plushes in the bottom left, which seemingly seem to be from the FNAF 4 room. So, at this point, we've traveled all over the timeline. The only place we haven't been is into the future, because that wouldn't make sense. But what does seem to be happening, that this agony in the ball pit from 3 decades worth of agony, torment, etc., is making Oswald experience these memories as if they're his own. Hence why you'll see us now traveling all over the timeline, because the description of the game itself on the website even says, travel through time to solve puzzles, gather clues, and outrun the threat chasing you through both universes. And it says, but this time it's not just your own life that's on the line. Oswald's father and 5 children from the past could all meet their end if you don't save them. Now that is an interesting one in itself, because it's implying we can save the victims of the past. I don't mean we can physically save them, because that doesn't make sense, they're already dead, but maybe put their souls to rest. Just like FNAF, everything about putting these souls inside the animatronics to rest. That is what I assume they mean by saving the life. Another thing which is extremely interesting is it says in one of the bullet points you can have multiple endings and escape the clutches of the animatronic. The animatronic, implying it's a single one, and assuming that is going to be Springtrap or Spring Bonnie. But in contrast to the book basically has Oswald playing games with the kids, befriending them until all hell breaks loose in a final couple of scenes. The game, however, doesn't seem to have this. It seems to solving puzzles, adrenaline-fueled story, traveling throughout the entire timeline. So I'm extremely interested to see how they adapt the book's version into this game version. Now, there is one huge glaring issue with this entire thing. The book says that there are 6 victims. Well, it actually says there's half a dozen. Half a dozen is 6. The graphic novel also says there are half a dozen victims, again being 6. But the game version itself says there are 5. Now, we know literally from the Mission Child incident that there are only 5 victims. So we know already that the book is showing that it wasn't entirely accurate or canon, because they've now changed the game to have 5. So what this now tells me is they've adjusted the book's version to make it 5 in the game to thus fit the canon of the game universe. That tells me that this game will now indeed be canon. Otherwise, they would have just kept it at 6. Now, before we take that as absolute gospel, there is another option. People genuinely believe that Scott cannot count and believes half a dozen is 5 rather than 6.
You stupid.
They're not.
What's 9 plus 10?
21.
You stupid.
That is an option, but to make a mistake in the original book and then in the novel, and to do so several times, makes it feel like it wasn't a mistake but was genuinely intended. But regardless, the game now has 5 and will be canon to the game universe. Now, as I said, it appears we're traveling all over the FNAF timeline because of all the little Easter eggs throughout the game, but that could just be it. It could be that they're little Easter eggs throughout the game, surely. Well, you would like to say that, but there is a poster of Balloon Boy in part of the trailer, and Balloon Boy is only really confirmed in FNAF 2. That is it. That is where he began. So having him pre-1987 when the game we know goes back to 1985 really would not make any sense at all. So I'm going to throw Easter eggs out the window, although there definitely will be some. I believe we are jumping throughout timelines. Either that, or the game will literally just be a 1-for-1 recreation of the original Into the Pit book, which could be true, who knows. There were also several screenshots shared online of Jeff's pizza. Now, I've personally got these from Freddy Fazbear's pizzafandom.com on the wiki, and it shows pictures which were not featured in the trailer, such as Spring Bonnie sitting in Oswald's home, basically where his dad would sit, and that is a recreation 1-for-1 from the actual book. We also see the exterior of Jeff's pizza, Oswald being wrapped around by his principal, Chica in the kitchen, so forth, Oswald's bedroom. Lots and lots of pictures here, guys. In terms of how the game would actually play and gameplay itself, well, it does say that it's going to be a puzzle adventure, so we can expect to be exploring various locations with what would presumably be Spring Bonnie / Springtrap / Ball Trap, whatever they're going to call him now, chasing us throughout these levels. Because because during the trailer, we do see Oswald hide in a golden Freddy outfit, which is extremely interesting itself, implying we actually see golden Freddy. Presumably this is a death cutscene because obviously we see Springtrap attack Oswald in the suit, and the graphic style itself is extremely interesting. I for one are extremely excited how they play this one out. With that being said, where it would fit in the overall timeline of FNAF seems to be placed just after FNAF 6. Because obviously we do go back in time and we see what looks like FNAF 6 alleyway with Helpy in the actual dumpster. Now, Helpy only came into the series in FNAF Pizza Simulator, although it is potential that he was there way before then. Regardless, I think it will be after 6 but before Help Wanted. But this will obviously be confirmed when the game releases. Now, there are also several other theories on the channel and a timeline refresher if you need it, fitting in Help Wanted 2 as well, so I highly recommend checking them out after this video. And if you've enjoyed it, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe because there's plenty more coming up on the channel on Into the Pit. I'm Twisty the Twisted Animatronic, and stay safe out there, superstars.